Here we go with Chapter 2, the Marshall Gambit. So this is happening after d4, d5, c4, c6, knight c3, e6 triangle setup. Now here, I'm looking at the club level database. The third most popular move is e4, and it's occurring in less than 10% of the games. But the reason I wanted to show e4 here is because this is sort of like the way to try to refute our triangle setup. And there's some really sharp lines. Our main line is going to be super long in this chapter, but that's because that's the line where white's going to press us the hardest. So just keep that in mind. Don't be discouraged by this chapter. The first line is super long. Memorize it, and then we'll kind of walk you through the other variations and how we can play for the advantage.
Yep, so as Matt said, first line is a doozy, and it's fun to look at, and we kind of magically end up fine, but we're down a piece for 10 moves, and the queen is just kind of running around. So the first line is an exception for, I think, probably all of our courses. So yeah, don't be discouraged. Let's do it, Matt. E4, and we're going to take it, and they're going to take back. And oh, I thought this was a branching point, but no. So bishop b4 check, and now there's a couple options for white.
Yeah,
The main, that we're going to look at.
Bishop
So
to
bishop
d2.
d2 first. All right. Did I gloss over anything that you wanted to go over in the first few moves?
I was just going to say, like, at the highest levels, this is the only way to kind of keep the position balanced. So that's why we're going into this theory. If we don't do this, we're giving white a really nice big center, and we're not pressing them at all. We're not playing for any compensation. So that was the only thing I wanted to add. Like, we have to play this line to get the compensation for the big center.
Yep, makes sense. So they play the bishop over, disconnecting the queen from the pawn. So we're going to snatch that pawn. And it's a really nice one to win because otherwise white just has a big center. Black is going to take our hanging bishop, and we are going to take their hanging knight with check in return. So already we have some non-automatic captures, exposing our king. We can't castle. So it's already getting pretty wild, but we're just getting started, my friends.
And this is a chapter where we are fighting for the initiative. This whole chapter. White is usually going to be a very aggressive player if they play the Marshall Gambit. They want the initiative. We want the initiative. So that's what you're going to notice here. There's this back and forth of dynamics. So after bishop to e2, there's some different lines here. And what I really wanted to do with this chapter is try to find the lines that are quote unquote the easiest to learn, but also I wanted to avoid any sort of dead draws. I don't like the lines where white's able to just repeat with a perpetual check or trade queens and do like a completely drawn endgame. So keep that in mind as well when you look at these recommendations. So now the most common move is bishop to a5, but the pretty big threat, queen to d8, checkmate. So the way we react to this is we play f6. What we would like to do now, if we could get these moves in, b6, kind of fianchetto this bishop, castle by hand by playing king f7, the knight out, and rook to d8. So if white plays slowly, which your opponent may do, they may not want to commit to queen d8 check, for example. If they play slowly, you can get a big advantage because you're going to be up a pawn, your queen's well placed, and your pieces are going to get developed very quickly here. So keep that in mind. We're showing you this very tactical long sequence, but if white deviates from the moves that we show you, hopefully you're in positions where you already have a nice, comfortable advantage.
Yep, so we're going to look at the most forcing variation first. Queen d8 check. So what do you think the best move is here?
I'm going to go with the only move, king f7.
Yeah, that's a good move. King f7. And white can do a few things. So we're going to look at knight f3. We're going to go b6 and cut off this connection between the bishop and the queen. So bishop needs to go somewhere. They could consider sacking, but that would be kind of ridiculous. Bishop c3, and we're going to fianchetto with tempo.
And
kind of cool.
Yeah, so this move is one you have to remember. And I'm giving this an exclamation point because if you look at it, your first thought is, what if queen d7 check? Aren't you just blundering a bishop? This is a bishop sacrifice. We're giving up a whole bishop here, but we're going to show you what happens if white goes for it. So the reason I like this line is because we're playing aggressive and we're trying to get that initiative back. We don't want to allow white to have everything. So after queen d7, we're recommending to block. We're giving this up, but we know that we can get the piece back in return. And this is a line where you can run it with Stockfish. You know, take our PGN file, put it in your favorite chess analysis tool, play through the different variations because you definitely want to kind of get comfortable in how to play these positions and how to fight. So queen takes b7, knight c5. Now there's only one move for white, right? So white is kind of walking this tightrope here. Rook h to c8, again kicking the queen. Queen comes back. White will need to probably insert knight to g5 check at some point here to give the piece back. So keep that in mind because this white queen is being kicked around so much that white might be in danger of getting checkmated in the middle of the board if they keep the knight on f3. So knight f5, hitting the queen again. We had 14 club level games in the database here. All 14 played this mistake with queen to h3. The best move, queen to g5. Who's going to find that? Queen to g5. And we still have the advantage there after queen g5. But we're going to show the line that 14 out of 14 players played, queen h3. So what happens after this?
All right, so queen h3, they are on this pawn, but we have a fancy move here, knight d3 check. So if you're keeping count of the material, we are still down a piece.
For a pawn.
For a pawn, yes, so down 2 points. And so I don't immediately see, oh, so they can't take because our queen pins, so they have to move their king. King f1, so goodbye castling rights. And now we play knight f4, so forking these two pieces. And now we are finally able to get our piece back. So we gambited a bishop for activity, and 27 moves later, we get it back. So if you didn't see how to get it back initially, you're not a grandmaster yet, neither are we. Don't feel bad because we finally get this knight fork and we're going to get the piece back.
It's funny, I was counting the moves right before you said 27. I came up with 7, but pretty close.
I just thought we were on move 18, so I just exaggerated it.
I like it. So yeah, white gives this back, knight g5 check. F takes g. We're threatening this. So queen f3 is the only way to kind of deal with both of those attacks. And now here we're finally going to allow the queen trade into an endgame, because if you look at the eval at the end of this endgame, knight takes e2, king takes, move like rook d8 or e5, we are now up 1 point according to Stockfish. So what we're going to do is kind of put these pawns on dark squares eventually, probably plant the knight, bring the rooks to the center. You have a 1 point advantage after all that. So scary line, but don't worry, that's the longest line that you have to learn. And if white makes any slip-ups along the way, hopefully it's in a position where we have a nice advantage.